I've never trusted silence. Not the peaceful kind people romanticize when they say, "Ah, the quiet of nature," or the comforting hush of a cozy room. No, I mean the heavy, suffocating kind of silence, the kind that presses against your ears like a vacuum, squeezing until you swear you can hear your own blood pumping through your veins. Maybe it's because of Hawthorne Asylum. I worked there for years, buried in the sterile white walls, listening to the sounds of madness, the screams, the sobbing, the whispers that never seemed to come from any single direction. In a place like that, silence isn't a relief. It's a warning. That's what I felt the day I went hiking in Black Hollow Woods, a silence too thick to be natural. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. Just a walk. A way to clear my head. After everything I'd seen at Hawthorne, after everything I tried to forget, the therapist I was forced to see said nature could help me reconnect with the world. The world. What a joke. Because out there, in that goddamn forest, I found something that wasn't part of any world I know. The trail started like any other. Damp leaves crunched beneath my boots, the faint smell of moss and decay in the air. The trees stood tall, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. But the deeper I went, the more the noise faded. No bird song. No rustle of animals in the underbrush. Just that heavy, choking silence. And then I saw it. A symbol. Carved deep into the bark of an old, gnarled tree, its lines jagged, angry. 3 overlapping circles, burned so deeply into the wood it looked like it had been there for years. Maybe longer. Something about it made my skin crawl. I told myself it was nothing. Just some bored kid with a knife or a wannabe cult trying to be edgy. Soon after, there was a whisper. It was faint, like the distant hiss of someone breathing just behind me. I froze mid-step, my body going rigid, every muscle coiled with that ancient, primal fear. I told myself it was the wind, even though there was no wind. Just that thick, choking silence. Slowly, I turned around. There was nothing. Just trees standing like sentinels, their bare branches clawing at the pale sky. But the whisper came again, clearer this time. Turn around. I spun faster this time, my heart punching against my ribs so hard I felt dizzy. And that's when I saw him. At first, he was just a shape, a figure standing between the trees about 20 feet away. Tall, unerringly still, like a shadow that forgot how to move with the sun. His body was thin, almost stretched, with arms that hung too long at his sides. But it was his face, or the absence of it, that made my breath hitch. There was no face. No eyes. No nose. No mouth. Just smooth, pale skin stretched tight like wax melted over bone. I blinked, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. That's the thing about working in a place like Hawthorne, you start to doubt your own senses. You learn that your brain is a traitor, capable of crafting horrors out of nothing. But when I opened my eyes again, he was still there. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a gnarled root. My lungs burned, screaming for air, but I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then I blinked. He was gone. Just gone. No sound. No footsteps. No rustle of leaves. It was as if he'd never been there at all. But the whisper remained. I see you. That broke the spell. I turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth, not caring about the branches tearing at my face or the roots clawing at my ankles. I ran to my cramped 2-story apartment on the outskirts of the city until my legs gave out, but I collapsed just outside the tree line, gasping for breath like a drowning man. I told myself it was a hallucination. A stress response. PTSD from the asylum. My therapist would nod sagely, scribble something in her notebook, and tell me to process the experience. But here's the thing. You can't process something that isn't finished. Because he's still out there. And he's still watching me. I didn't sleep that night. I tried, God, I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing there between the trees. That blank face, smooth and featureless, like a canvas stretched too tight. No expression, no humanity. Just an empty mask staring back at me. But it wasn't just in my head. I could feel him. Even here, miles from the woods, nestled in my crappy apartment with the buzzing fridge and the thin walls that let me hear my neighbor's TV droning late into the night, I could feel his eyes. Except, he didn't have any. I told myself it was stress. Maybe even a delayed breakdown. Wouldn't be surprising after what happened at Hawthorne. I've seen worse things than faceless men in the woods. I've cleaned blood off tiled floors, pulled bodies out of closets, and listened to people scream until their voices broke like glass. But this felt different. Worse. By dawn, I decided to go to the police. I rehearsed my story in the mirror, trying to make it sound less insane. There was a man in the woods, I'd say. I think he's dangerous. That was all I needed to tell them. Leave out the whispering. Leave out the part where his face was missing. But when I got to the station, the words tangled in my throat. The place smelled like burnt coffee and stale air. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to make my head ache. An officer sat behind a chipped desk, his uniform wrinkled, his badge dull with fingerprints. He glanced up when I approached, his eyes half-lidded with boredom. "Can I help you?" he asked. I cleared my throat. "I saw something in Black Hollow Woods. A man. I think he's..." "Black Hollow?" His posture stiffened slightly. Not much, but enough for me to notice. His pen hovered over a notepad. "You hiking out there alone?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah. I go out there sometimes. But this time I saw someone. He wasn't right." The officer leaned forward, his boredom gone. "Did you hear about the hikers?" My stomach twisted. "What hikers?" He sighed, glancing around like he didn't want to be overheard. Then he lowered his voice. 3 people went missing out there last week. They found one of them. Or parts of him. A cold wave washed over me. "Parts?" He nodded grimly. Face was gone. Skin stretched weird. Like it was peeled off. He made a vague motion with his hands, as if words couldn't fully explain it. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees went weak, and I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. The officer must have noticed. "You okay, buddy?" I forced a nod. "Yeah. Just didn't expect that." "Did the guy you saw look like he could have done something like that?" I thought about the faceless man. How do you describe someone like that? "Yeah, officer, he looked like a nightmare made of skin and whispers." Instead, I just said, "Yeah. I think so." He scribbled something in his notebook. "We'll check it out." But I could tell he didn't believe me. Not really. Maybe he thought I was just some nutcase trying to insert myself into the investigation. I'd met plenty of people like that at Hawthorne, delusional minds looking for patterns in chaos. Maybe I was becoming one of them. I went home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. My apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in like they were breathing with me. I kept glancing at the windows, half expecting to see that blank face staring back. And then, just as I was starting to convince myself I was losing it, I heard it again. The whisper. "I see you." I spun around, my heart racing, but there was no one there. The apartment was empty. The door was locked. The windows shut. I ran to the window anyway, pulling the blinds aside with shaking hands. At first, I didn't see anything. Just the empty street, bathed in the sickly glow of the streetlights. A few cars parked along the curb. Nothing unusual. But then, movement. A shadow shifted across the pavement, too quick to be natural. My eyes snapped to the corner of the street, and I saw him. Standing perfectly still under a flickering street lamp. The same tall figure. The same blank, featureless face. I blinked. Gone. But the whisper remained, like an echo carved into my skull. "I'm coming." I didn't sleep that night, either. I didn't go to work the next day. Hell, I didn't even leave my apartment. I just sat there, wrapped in a threadbare blanket like it could protect me from what I'd seen. The world outside felt unreal, distant, like I was watching it from underwater. But he was real. The faceless man. The whispers. The thing that was watching me. I kept replaying the encounter in my mind over and over, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I'd snapped. Finally cracked after all those years at Hawthorne. My therapist always said trauma doesn't leave, it just waits. Maybe this was it, my brain's final betrayal. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I could still feel him. Like a splinter buried under my skin. After hours of staring at the ceiling, I decided to do something, anything, to distract myself. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen almost blinding in the dim apartment. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard, then started typing. Black Hollow Woods missing hikers. The search results were immediate. News articles, forum posts, local reports. Too many. I clicked on the first headline, Bodies Found in Black Hollow, Police Investigating Possible Serial Killer. The article was vague. Authorities were looking into the case, but details were scarce. No names. No suspects. Just the same sterile language meant to keep people calm while hiding the truth. But buried deep in the article was something that made my blood run cold. The victim's face was mutilated beyond recognition. Skin stretched and removed with surgical precision. Authorities have not released further details. Surgical precision. I stared at those words, my mind flashing back to the operating rooms in Hawthorne. To the procedures we performed on patients who clawed their own faces, who tried to peel their skin off because they swore something was underneath. Back then, I thought they were insane. Now I wasn't so sure. I kept digging, clicking through more articles, more stories. The deeper I went, the more I found. Not just recent disappearances, this had been happening for decades. Hikers. Campers. Even entire families. All vanished near Black Hollow Woods. Some were never found. The ones who were, their faces were always gone. It wasn't just a killer. It was something worse. Something older. I needed answers. The police weren't going to help. They were too busy covering their asses, writing off the cases as isolated incidents. But I knew better. I found an old forum dedicated to local urban legends. Most of it was the usual crap, Bigfoot sightings, ghost stories, conspiracy theories, but one thread caught my attention. The Hollow Man, Black Hollow's dark secret. There were dozens of posts, some dating back 10 years. People sharing stories about sightings, disappearances, strange symbols carved into trees. The same symbol I'd seen in the woods burned into my mind, 3 overlapping circles. One post stood out. A user named Whispers in the Dark had written, "He watches from the trees." No face, no name. Just the Hollow Man. If you see him once, he's already inside you. Don't listen to the whispers. That's how he gets in. There was an address at the bottom of the post. No explanation, just an address. I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys and left. The address led me to a crumbling apartment complex on the edge of town, the kind of place where the rent was cheap because people didn't ask questions. The hallways smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. I found the unit, 3B, and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. My heart raced, half expecting the door to swing open and reveal that blank face waiting for me. But nothing. I was about to leave when I noticed the door wasn't fully closed. Just slightly ajar. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Rot. Decay. The kind of stench you don't forget once you've smelled it. I'd smelled it plenty of times in Hawthorne when patients died alone in their rooms, unnoticed for hours. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from a flickering TV screen. Static hissed, casting shadows across the walls. And then I saw him. Not the Hollow Man. A man slumped in a chair, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, his face gone. The skin was stripped clean, the bone underneath slick and red. But carved into his chest, deep enough to expose ribs, was the symbol, 3 overlapping circles. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on something slick. I looked down and realized I was standing in a pool of blood. And that's when I heard it. The whisper. "I see you." I spun around, heart pounding in my ears, but the apartment was empty. No footsteps. No doors opening. Just the whisper echoing in my skull. I didn't call the police. What was I supposed to say? Hey, there's a faceless killer stalking me through whispers and symbols. They'd lock me up. Maybe that would have been safer. Instead, I went home and found this symbol carved into my front door. I didn't even have time to unlock the door before I saw it, the symbol carved deep into the wood. 3 overlapping circles. Crude, jagged lines like it had been scratched with something sharp. Something that didn't belong in the hands of anyone sane. My keys slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the floor. I just stood there, staring at the mark, my breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. The hallway felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your skull until even your heartbeat feels like an alarm. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence. Maybe some local punk is having fun. But no, it wasn't random. It was the same symbol carved into the chest of that dead man in the apartment. The same symbol I'd seen in the woods. And now it was on my door. I didn't want to go inside. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to get in my car, to drive until the world stopped feeling wrong. But fear has a funny way of reading you in place, like your body's too stupid to run even when your brain's screaming for it. I picked up the keys with shaking hands and slowly unlocked the door. The apartment was dark. I'd left the lights on when I left, I was sure of it, but now it was nothing but shadows. The air was cold, colder than it should have been. I stepped inside, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. Nothing looked out of place at first. The couch, the cluttered coffee table, the stack of dishes in the sink. Just off. Like someone had been here, touched things just enough to make them feel wrong. I shut the door behind me, locking it out of habit. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Upstairs. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone didn't care if I heard them because they knew I was too scared to do anything about it. I stared at the ceiling, my mouth dry, my mind racing. I didn't own a gun. The closest thing I had to a weapon was a rusty crowbar tucked in the hall closet. I grabbed it. The metal felt heavy in my hands, but it was better than nothing. I crept up the stairs, every step creaking under my weight. The footsteps had stopped, replaced by something worse, silence. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out in both directions. My bedroom door was half open. I edged closer, holding the crowbar like a shield. My breath came in quick, shallow bursts. I pushed the door open. Nothing. The room was empty. Just the unmade bed, the cluttered nightstand, the cracked mirror on the wall. But I could feel it, someone had been here. That's when I noticed the closet door was slightly ajar. I froze. My fingers tightened around the crowbar. I stared at that gap, my mind screaming, "Don't open it. Just leave. Run." But I didn't. I reached out and yanked the door open. Nothing. Just clothes hanging limply on plastic hangers. A pair of old boots on the floor. But carved into the inside of the door, so faint I almost missed it, was a single word. Mine. I stumbled back, my breath hitching in my throat. My vision blurred at the edges, a buzzing growing in my ears like static. That's when the whisper came. "I'm inside." I spun around, swinging the crowbar wildly. But there was no one there. Just the empty room. But the whisper wasn't in the room. It was in my head. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in the living room, clutching the crowbar, my eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement. I kept the lights on, every single one, as if that would somehow keep him away. But the whispering didn't stop. Soft at first, like a distant voice on the wind. Then louder. Closer. You can't hide. I covered my ears, rocking back and forth like the patients at Hawthorne used to do when the voices got too loud. I used to think it was pointless, just another symptom of their broken minds. But now I understood. It didn't stop the whispering, but it made me feel like I was doing something. At some point, I must have passed out because I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds. For a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. That maybe my mind had finally cracked and none of it was real. But then I saw the footprints. Mud. Trailing from the front door, across the living room, up the stairs. Bare feet. But the door was still locked. I didn't leave the apartment for 2 days. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the muddy footprints, tracing them with my eyes over and over until they felt burned into my brain. Bare feet. Human, but wrong somehow. The toes were too long, the arches too flat. They didn't belong to anyone who walked like the rest of us. But the door had been locked from the inside. No windows were broken. Nothing was forced open. It didn't make sense. Then again, nothing had made sense since the day I went into those woods. Since I saw him, the faceless man. The hollow man. The whisper started again. I see you. I jumped, knocking over the chair. The sound seemed to ripple through the apartment, making the shadows shift like they were alive. I wasn't safe here. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and bolted. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. The streets blurred past, the city dissolving into nothing. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him standing there in the road, his blank face staring after me. Eventually, I found myself parked outside the library. It was old, the kind of place that smelled like dust and forgotten things. I don't even know why I went in. Maybe because libraries are supposed to feel safe. I found the archives in the basement. Rows of yellowed newspapers, brittle and crumbling at the edges. I started pulling articles at random, anything related to disappearances, murders, unsolved cases. Hours passed. Maybe more. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like insects, casting everything in a sickly glow. And then I found it. All murders stretched back decades, authorities stumped. The article was from 1954. It detailed a string of killings eerily similar to the ones I'd been reading about. Victims found faceless, mutilated, with strange symbols carved nearby. But one detail caught my eye. Witnesses report seeing a tall, thin man near the crime scenes. Descriptions vary, but all mention one disturbing fact: the man had no face. My blood turned to ice. At the bottom of the article was a grainy black and white photo. A crowd of people gathered near a crime scene. If you looked closely, just behind them, near the edge of the trees. Him. Clear as day. The same featureless face. The same impossibly thin frame. But the photo was taken over 70 years ago. I stumbled out of the library, my mind spinning. The sky was dark, the streetlights flickering. I fumbled for my car keys, hands shaking so badly I dropped them. When I bent down to pick them up, I saw something etched into the pavement. The symbol. 3 overlapping circles. I backed away, my heart pounding in my throat. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Getting closer. I turned around. And there he was. Standing in the middle of the street. Not moving. Not speaking. Just watching. Even without a face, I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't stop running until my legs gave out. I don't remember how far I went. Just streets blurring past, dim streetlights flickering overhead, dark windows watching me like hollow eyes. My lungs burned, my chest felt like it was caving in, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. But I couldn't stop hearing the footsteps. Even when I collapsed behind a dumpster in some alley I didn't recognize, I could still hear them, soft, deliberate, echoing in my skull even though the street was empty. Like they'd been stitched into the fabric of my mind. It wasn't until the sky started to lighten with the sickly gray of dawn that I realized he wasn't there anymore. Or maybe he was. Watching from somewhere I couldn't see. Because that's what he does. He watches. I finally dragged myself back to the apartment. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that felt heavy, like it had settled into the walls, soaking into every crack. I half expected to find the door wide open, the lock smashed, the apartment ransacked. But it wasn't. The door was still locked. The muddy footprints were still there, dry now, crusted into the cheap laminate flooring like they belonged there. And worst of all, the symbol was still carved into the wood. Deep enough that no amount of scrubbing would ever get it out. I didn't care anymore. I stepped over the footprints, locked the door behind me, and collapsed onto the couch. I felt hollow, like something inside me had been scooped out and left behind in that alley. But I couldn't sit still. I had to know more. I dug out an old shoebox from under the bed, something I hadn't touched in years. It was full of things from my time at Hawthorne. I'd kept them for reasons I never fully understood. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe because some part of me knew that one day I'd need them. Photos. Notes. Patient files. I flipped through them with shaking hands, not even sure what I was looking for. Just something. A connection. A thread to pull. And then I found it. A photo. It was from one of the worst cases we ever had, a patient named Victor Holloway. The irony of his name didn't hit me until later. Victor had been admitted after murdering his entire family. When the police found him, he was covered in their blood, sitting in the middle of the living room, carving symbols into the floor with a kitchen knife. 3 overlapping circles. I stared at the photo, my pulse quickening. In the background, carved faintly into the wall behind him, was the same symbol. I never noticed it before. And Victor's face. There was something wrong with it. Not like it was missing or anything. But the expression. His eyes were wide, staring, like he was looking at something just beyond the camera. Something no one else could see. I flipped through more files, more photos. And I started to notice the pattern. Patients who claimed to see things, the faceless man, they called him. Descriptions varied, but the details were always the same, tall, thin, no face. And the whispers. Always the whispers. Some of them enter on the same symbol over and over, filling pages until there was no white space left. I thought they were crazy. But now I wasn't so sure. There was one photo that made me drop the stack entirely. It was of Victor's room after he was found. He carved something into the wall with his fingernails, deep enough to tear through the paint and into the drywall beneath. He is inside me. My breath caught in my throat. And then, as if summoned by the words themselves, I heard the whisper again. I see you. I spun around, heart racing, expecting to see him standing there in the apartment. But there was nothing. Just the dim light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. But the whisper didn't fade. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block it out, but it didn't help. The voice slithered into my thoughts like smoke, filling every corner until I couldn't think straight. You can't hide. I stumbled to the bathroom, my vision blurring, the walls closing in. I flipped on the light and stared into the mirror, trying to anchor myself. But something was wrong. My face. It didn't look like mine anymore. At first, I thought it was just the lighting. But no! My features were softer. Blurred. Like a photo left out in the rain. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass. My eyes didn't look like my eyes. My skin felt too tight, stretched over something that wasn't supposed to be there. I dug my nails into my cheeks, trying to feel something, anything. But it was numb. That's when I realized. He wasn't just watching me. He was getting in. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at my reflection, waiting for my face to disappear completely. Eventually, the whisper faded. The edges of my features sharpened again, like whatever was happening had decided to retreat for now. But it wasn't gone. It was waiting. I woke up on the bathroom floor. My face was pressed against the cold tiles, slick with sweat and something else, blood, I don't remember passing out. I don't even remember falling asleep. 1 minute, I was staring at my reflection, watching my face blur and melt like wax. The next, I was choking on the metallic taste of copper, my vision swimming in red. I sat up slowly, my head pounding, my muscles screaming like I'd been hit by a truck. My mouth was dry, my throat raw, like I'd been screaming for hours. But the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the mark, carved into my skin. I lifted my shirt with trembling hands, my breath catching in my throat. There, etched deep into the flesh just below my ribs, was the symbol ***, 3 overlapping circles, ***. Not drawn, not painted, carved. The edges were jagged, raw, the skin inflamed and oozing. My hands shook as I traced the lines, wincing at the sharp sting. The cuts were deep, precise. But I didn't do this. Did I? I stumbled to my feet, dizzy, gripping the sink for balance. My reflection stared back at me, pale and hollow-eyed, but my face was intact. For now. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to ground myself, but it didn't help. The whisper was still there, faint but constant, like a song stuck in the back of my mind. Mine. I had to get out. I tore through the apartment, stuffing whatever I could into a bag, my wallet, my keys, a flashlight, the rusty crowbar I'd started sleeping with beside my bed. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city blurring past like a fever dream. My hands were slick with sweat, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't escape the feeling. Like he was inside me. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see him sitting in the back seat, his faceless head tilted slightly, watching. But it was just me. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where no one asks questions as long as you pay in cash. The walls were thin, stained with years of smoke and God knows what else. I locked the door behind me, deadbolt and chain, and shoved a chair under the knob for good measure. Then I peeled off my shirt and stared at the mark again. It was worse now. The skin around it had turned dark, almost black, spreading like rot. The edges of the wound were jagged, but the lines of the symbol were perfect, too perfect. Like it had been carved with something sharper than a knife. I grabbed the mirror from the bathroom, angling it so I could see better. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. And that's when I saw it. Movement. Beneath the skin. Tiny, subtle ripples, like something squirming just under the surface. I stumbled back, dropping the mirror. It shattered, shards scattering across the dirty tile floor. The whisper grew louder. You're mine. I screamed. I don't even remember deciding to do it, but suddenly I had the crowbar in my hands. I brought it down on my own side with all the strength I had left. The pain was white-hot, blinding, like fire exploding through my nerves. But it didn't stop me. I kept hitting. Again. And again. Blood sprayed, splattering the walls, the floor, my face. But I didn't care. I had to get it out. I dropped the crowbar, my vision swimming, and reached into the gaping wound with trembling fingers. I could feel it, something hard. Smooth. Not bone. Not flesh. I dug my fingers in, screaming through gritted teeth, and pulled. And what I pulled out wasn't human. A small, smooth black stone, slick with my blood, shaped like an eye. The second it left my body, the whispering stopped. Just like that. Silence. But it wasn't over. Because as I lay there on the blood-soaked floor, gasping for breath, I saw him, standing in the corner of the room, his faceless head tilted slightly, watching. I woke up gasping, the sting of dry blood cracking on my face. The motel ceiling above me was a patchwork of water stains, each one a distorted shape, bleeding into the next like ink on damp paper. My side was on fire, the makeshift bandages soaked through, sticking to the raw wound beneath. The pain wasn't just in my flesh, it was deeper, coiled around my ribs like something alive. I'd passed out. Again. But this time, he didn't take me. Or maybe he just left me here to rot. The room stank of copper and sweat. The shattered mirror reflected pieces of me, fragments that didn't feel connected anymore. My face was pale, hollow, my eyes sunken, as if the hollow man had already started to carve me from the inside out. But I wasn't dead, and that meant I had one more chance. I tore off the blood-soaked rags from my side, gritting my teeth as fresh pain exploded through my body. The wound was infected, the skin around it dark and swollen. But I didn't care. Pain meant I was still here. I stuffed the black stone, the eye, into my bag, wrapped tight in whatever scraps of cloth I could find, though I could still feel its cold pulse even through the layers. It was like a second heartbeat, steady and relentless. I didn't bother cleaning the room. I left the bloodstains, the broken mirror, the echoes of my screams embedded in the walls. Let someone else find it. Let them wonder what kind of monster it passed through. They wouldn't be wrong. The drive back to Black Hollow Woods felt different this time. Not like I was going somewhere. More like I was going home. The sky was an endless gray, the kind that never brightens, no matter how high the sun climbs. The road seemed to stretch forever, lined with trees that looked like bones reaching up from the earth. I kept my eyes on the road, but every shadow felt like it was watching me. And maybe they were. When I reached the woods, the engine sputtered and died. I didn't even try to restart it. I got out, grabbed my bag, and started walking. The trees welcomed me like old friends. Their twisted branches stretched overhead, blocking out the sky. The ground was soft beneath my boots, soaked with something darker than just water. Blood, maybe. Or something worse. I didn't need a trail. I just knew where to go. The clearing was waiting for me. In the middle of it there was a huge black tree. Massive. Black. Its bark split open with deep red veins pulsing just beneath the surface, like it was alive. Symbols carved into its trunk, 3 overlapping circles, etched so deep the bark had peeled away entirely, leaving raw, exposed flesh beneath. And hanging from its branches. Faces. Stripped clean, stretched thin like parchment, swaying gently in the dead air. Their mouths hung open in silent screams, eyes wide and empty. I didn't flinch. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. And beneath the tree, standing like he'd been waiting for me all along, the hollow man. His faceless head tilted slightly, his body unnervingly still, like a puppet with its strings pulled taut. I didn't hesitate. I pulled the crowbar from my bag, my fingers slick with sweat and blood, and I charged. I don't remember screaming, but my throat was raw with it. The hollow man didn't move until I was almost on top of him. Then, with impossible speed, he turned. I swung the crowbar with every ounce of strength I had, aiming for his blank, featureless head. But he caught it. His fingers wrapped around the metal like it was nothing, the metal groaning under his grip, bending with a sickening screech. He yanked, and I stumbled forward, slamming into him. His skin was ice cold, but beneath it, there was nothing. No muscle, no bone. Just emptiness wrapped in flesh. I drove my knee into his midsection, expecting resistance. But my leg sank in too far, swallowed by that endless cold. I wrenched the crowbar free and swung again. This time, it connected. The blow landed on the side of his head with a wet crunch. But there was no blood. No reaction. Just the sound of something soft collapsing beneath the skin. He staggered back slightly, and I pressed the advantage, swinging again and again. Each hit was fueled by something deeper than fear, pure animal rage. But he didn't go down. His hand shot out, fingers like steel hooks, and dug into my side, right into the wound. I screamed, the pain white hot, blinding. But I didn't stop. I brought the crowbar down on his arm, snapping it in half with a sickening crack. The bone jutted out at an impossible angle, the skin tearing like paper. But he didn't flinch. He grabbed me with his other hand, lifting me off the ground effortlessly. His grip crushed my throat, cutting off my air, my vision darkening at the edges. But I still had the crowbar. I swung it one last time, driving it straight into where his face should have been. The metal sank deep. There was a sound, a horrible, wet, gurgling noise, like something thick and foul being pulled through a drain. He dropped me. I hit the ground hard, coughing, my throat raw, but I forced myself to my feet. His face, or what was left of it, was tearing open. Not blood. Not bone. Just darkness. Like the skin was a thin veil holding something back. Something that wasn't supposed to exist in this world. I didn't stop. I drove the crowbar into him again. And again. And again. Each hit splattered more of that darkness, seeping into the ground, the air, into me. But he wasn't dying. He was changing. His form collapsed, folding in on itself like a shadow pulling back from the light. Tendrils of darkness slithered out, wrapping around my legs, my arms, my throat. I reached into my bag, my fingers closing around the black stone, the eye. It pulsed, hungry. I shoved it deep into his chest, into the mass of writhing darkness. The reaction was immediate. A deafening screech filled the clearing, so loud it felt like my skull would shatter. The tree behind him shook violently, faces falling from its branches, their silent screams swallowed by the noise. The hollow man convulsed, his body collapsing, sucked into the stone like water down a drain. And then, silence. I stood there, panting, covered in blood, mine, it didn't matter. I thought it was over. But then I heard it. Soft. Faint. The whisper. Thank you. The words slithered into my ears like something wet and alive. I stood there, panting, the taste of blood sharp in the back of my throat. The crowbar slipped from my fingers, hitting the ground with a dull, final thud. The hollow man was gone, sucked into the black stone like his very existence had been folded in on itself, crushed into nothing. But the whisper remained. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the dirt, hands clawing at the soil as if I could somehow ground myself, anchor my mind to the earth, to reality. But reality was slipping through my fingers like sand. The ground was pulsing beneath me. The tree, the one with faces hanging from its branches like rotten fruit, wasn't just a tree. It was alive. I could hear it breathing, feel it watching me with those hollow, empty sockets carved into flesh. I stared at my hands, covered in blood, my blood, his blood. Does it matter anymore? That's when I saw it. The mark. 3 overlapping circles. It had spread. No longer just carved into my side. It had crept up my chest, down my arms, black veins spider-webbing beneath my skin like ink bleeding through paper. And I felt it growing. Not on me. In me. I stumbled to my feet, every nerve screaming in protest, but I couldn't stay there, not with that tree, not with the faces still swaying in the dead air. I ran. Through the woods, blind and gasping, the trees closing in like ribs around a heart. The sky above had turned to ash, the sun nothing more than a dim smear behind clouds that looked too low, too heavy. But the woods didn't let me go. Every step felt like I was running in place. The landscape repeating. The same dead tree. The same rock. The same twisted roots clawing up from the earth. I was trapped. Not in the woods. In him. I don't know how long I ran before I collapsed again, this time on the crumbling asphalt of a forgotten road that cut through the forest like a scar. I lay there, staring up at the sky, feeling the cold seep into my bones. I made it back to the car somehow. I don't remember unlocking the door, don't remember starting the engine. My hands moved on their own, like they belonged to someone else. The rearview mirror was cracked, but I caught a glimpse of my reflection and I almost crashed the car. Because my face wasn't mine anymore. It was fading. My features blurring, melting, the skin too smooth, too tight, like wax stretched over nothing. I punched the mirror, shattering it completely, as if breaking the glass would somehow break the truth staring back at me. But I knew. I was becoming him. I drove until the gas tank ran dry. I didn't care where I was going. I just wanted to outrun the thing inside me. But you can't outrun what's inside your skin. I ended up in some nameless town, the kind of place people pass through without ever really seeing. I stumbled out of the car, my legs barely holding me up, and made my way to a convenience store. A clerk behind the counter barely looked up from his phone as I walked in, blood-streaked, hollow-eyed, a corpse that hadn't figured out it was dead yet. I went straight to the bathroom, locked the door, stared into the mirror, and there he was. Not behind me. In me. The hollow man, staring out through my own eyes. I dug my nails into my face, screaming, trying to tear him out, clawing at my skin until blood ran down my neck, mixing with the sweat and grime. But no matter how deep I scratched, I couldn't reach him. Because he wasn't hiding beneath my skin. He was my skin. I stumbled out of the bathroom, dripping blood across the tile floor. The clerk finally noticed me, his eyes going wide with horror. I tried to speak, to warn him, to say something, anything. But no words came out. Because I didn't have a mouth anymore. I don't know how long it's been. Days? Weeks? Time doesn't make sense anymore. Not here. Not when you've lost your face. Not when you've lost yourself. I thought killing him would end it. I thought if I could tear the hollow man apart, rip him from the roots of Black Hollow Woods, I'd be free. But he wasn't a man. He was never a man. He's an infection. A parasite that doesn't just wear your skin. He becomes you. I'm writing this from a place I never thought I'd see again. Hawthorne Asylum. Funny, isn't it? After all those years working here, locking people away, sedating them, labeling their terror as delusion, now I'm on the other side of the glass. The lights are too bright here. The walls too white. Sterile. But no amount of bleach can scrub away the stains beneath. I see them. The faces of the patients I left behind. Victor Holloway, he knew. The woman who screamed about the faceless man until her vocal cords shredded, she knew. The boy who carved symbols into his skin, crying, he's inside me. He knew. And I called them insane. But they weren't. I was. The doctors here ask me questions through the glass. Their mouths move, but I don't hear the words. All I hear is the whisper. Thank you. They think I'm catatonic. But I'm not. I'm listening. Listening to him. I watch them scribble notes. They use words like dissociation, psychosis, identity fragmentation. They think they're diagnosing me. But they're not. They're documenting him. The mark has spread. Not just on my skin. Through me. Into the walls. The floors. The people. I see it when the orderlies walk past, their shadows twitching in ways that don't match their steps. I see it in the way the lights flicker, in the stains that bloom across the ceiling like veins. The hollow man isn't gone. He's growing. Feeding. Every scream in this place is a prayer to him. Last night, I saw my reflection in the window. Not glass, just a thin membrane between here and there. And staring back wasn't me. It was him. But here's the thing. It wasn't just one face. It was all of them. Victor. The hikers. The clerk. The people from the woods. All their faces stretched and stitched together into one horrible tapestry of flesh. And right in the center, my face. Or what used to be mine. I thought I was the last one. The final piece. But I was wrong. You're next. Yes, you. Reading this. You think you're safe because it's just a story. Just words on a screen. But that's how he starts. A whisper. A shadow in the corner of your eye. A symbol carved where it shouldn't be. 3 overlapping circles. Go ahead, look at your reflection. Do you recognize yourself? Really? Or is there something missing? I can't stop him. But maybe, just maybe, I can warn you. Or maybe that's what he wants me to do. Maybe the words are his infection now. Maybe this story is the seed. And now it's inside you. Thank you.